I'm tired. When I first talked about Mortal Kombat 1's story, I decided to skip the ending as I felt it wasn't significant enough to go over and how it was essentially an excuse for certain events to happen, with no proper build-up. Something pretty needless to say at the time, and for what it was all truly worth in that video, I feel a good portion of the story was actually alright, up until the ending. Little did I know, people actually took this game's lackluster ending for what it was, and have actually diluted themselves into thinking that this ending was okay, and there was something actually worthwhile with the sequel bait. Yikes. Guys, they've done this every single time. We should all know good and damn well, whenever an MK game sequel baits these days, nothing really great comes from it. Stop. Regardless, I felt the need lately to talk about this story once again. Throughout this video, I want to at least try to back up 3 major factors that I want to point out. 1. Titan's overall flip-flop are hard in this game. 2. Mortal Kombat has no business diving into alternate timelines. And 3. There is no real power scaling in this universe, like, at all. Sucky thing is, in order for me to reestablish what makes this game's ending flawed, I need to go back to the previous game and quickly flesh out what made that game's entire story flawed. I covered this briefly in my last discussion, so I'll try to be a little faster here. MK11's story within the first 30 minutes worth was already setting itself up for failure. MKX was just short of actually being kind of alright. But the reason that game's story was better was because there was a stronger sense of what the focus was. Shinnok's the villain, Quan Chi's trying to bring him back, a lot of the good guys are now bad, and we've got new good guys to help us out now. Things get addressed at least somewhat properly, if not with some errors in plot and lack of exposition. But regardless, all this game's story really needed to be better was just a little rewrite in order to iron out some of the things that weren't explained, and we would have been relatively alright. There was a sense of cause and effect in that game's story. Mileena was waging a war with Kotal Khan, but it ends with her death and splitting up the small alliance she put together. D'Vorah was working from the inside with Kotal Khan, only to be revealed that she was working with Quan Chi, thus aiding in Shinnok's return. Sub-Zero works to make peace with Scorpion and reveal that Quan Chi was actually what led to Hanzo's clan's demise, not Bi-Han. Therefore, Scorpion would go on to kill Quan Chi. Due to Scorpion's killing Quan Chi, we can no longer bring back the Revenants to their normal selves. It ends with the big piece of the conflict solved, and the only loose end we've really got to tie up is half our gang is still under mind control. And thanks to Revenge Boner Ninja Man over here, they're gonna stay that way. So MK11 has one job really, which is to tie up said loose end and keep the ball rolling. The possibilities are endless. Revenants versus the remaining Earthrealm defenders. How can this go? What characters and relationships will develop? How will the Revenants behave without their master? Will their conditions be further explored? Will the other characters be pushed to a limit they can't come back from? What will become of the new Dark Raiden? Will Onaga be pulling up again after we've taken down Shinnok? MK11, what's next? Yeah, let's just throw in time travel, bring back the others, and then, you know. Instead of doing anything that could have made for an interesting follow-up to what was present in MKX, MK11 focused solely on that one loose end it had to tie up, so in order to get it tied, we brought in some wild factor in order for us to, well, pretty much do whatever we want for a few hours. I can go on for a while about MK11's plot, and how just about every decision made in that story wasn't very good. But that's another topic in itself that could be its own video one day. What does this have to do with MK1 and its ending? Well, MK11 was really just an excuse for things to happen. How else were the OG characters supposed to come back after they've effectively written themselves into a corner? That cop-out dilemma is kind of the same thing here. Once MK1's actual villain is revealed, the game feels the need to speedrun its ending while trying to give some fan service to the first timeline. I mean, hell, the whole game in itself is kind of just meant to please some people who jack a little too hard to everything in 3D games. MK11 and 1 make a frustrating reveal that this series in fact has an infinite number of alternate timelines, all good, bad, and everything in between, I guess. See, the problem is that this game's ending feels so disconnected from the rest of the story that the event along with the reference feels so out of left field and disingenuous to the point where the only way this can work is if you effectively turn your brain off and not acknowledge the events leading up to this. And I don't mean just this game. First, let's address why giving all of the characters a Titan form is... Yo, seriously, were they just trying to... Wait, were they just trying to, like, do Super Saiyan or something? Like, it was like Super Saiyan bargain sale, but for Mortal Kombat, and what the hell? Okay, Titans in Mortal Kombat lore are supposed to be really scaling up to even a higher status than Elder Gods, at least according to the lore. Apparently, Titans are so rare that they were considered to just be crazy made up hype and that was it. The first ever Titan we actually see is Kronika. It's fair to say this lady is supposed to be pretty goddamn powerful. At least, she was hyped up to be. She's Shinnok's mom, can manipulate time to her will, but chooses not to and ensure there's a balance between good and evil, which is really just a plot device to get rid of Raiden and bring back the others. She can control Sand of Time, make little sand time weapons, and overall, her goal is to have a perfect timeline, to the point where she couldn't help but constantly restart it so many times, overall driving her to madness. Nice retcon there, guys, nailed it. Titans overall are supposed to be really strong as far as scaling goes, only being surpassed by the one and only One Being. The One Being is pretty much the strongest thing ever in Mortal Kombat ever. Let's not even really touch it. So much so that the best way to really deal with his existence is just to be grateful that he was overthrown by the Titans and Elder Gods combined and make sure he never ever revives again. Mind you, the One Being is the only one stronger than Titans. He's pretty much allowed everything to exist. That means we're reaching pretty damn high up there in terms of power. Like, really high, right? So, it's fair to say that the top of the food chain is the One Being. Right below it would be Titans, then Elder Gods, then regular gods like Raiden and Fujin. Reasonable power scale, right? Well, wash it away instantly when Liu Kang fuses with Raiden somehow and beats Kronika. Okay. After that, Liu Kang then gets access to the Hourglass, which grants him strength on the same skill of Kronika, since she was a Titan, therefore he and anyone who gets access to this can also be a Titan. And thanks to this game pretty much confirming that every ending in MK11 where every character gets access to the Hourglass, that means every character in their own alternate timeline is now stronger than even an Elder God. Through that alone, it's canon. All of it. Just because. Where do these alternate timelines even come from? They can't be a result of Kronika restarting the timeline because they killed her. So, one would think Raiden and Liu Kang alone would be way too weak to even stand a chance against Kronika. Somehow, the fusion between the two alone was somehow enough to kill Kronika. A Titan. This plot point alone is so broken that it straight up tells that any given character can just go on ahead and deck the second strongest of beings in the entire series and get that same power from that alone. Not only that, but the rarity is completely debunked with how many Titans you have wandering around thanks to this game. We're breaking our own rules that we made. Even if you were to argue that Fire God Liu Kang was somehow strong enough to actually beat Kronika, which alone is breaking the same rules established, this won't matter because it's canon thanks to this game that damn near everyone that got that status. MK1 effectively made every MK11 ending canon, meaning that it's canon that everyone beats Kronika, everyone gets access to the Hourglass, and everyone gets Titan status right then and there. And so that status is also like bullshit because you're not that strong. Why? Easy. Because Mortal Kombat's power scaling is retarded. What's new? Ever since MK8 happened, this chapter system has been a complete piss-off to any character not included. For those who don't know, the chapter system in this series was introduced in Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe's story. Each chapter would be tied to a specific character and would proceed to go on for about 4 or 5 fights, controlling that character while cutscenes play in between. Not only is this so limiting in making the entire narrative of events harder than what they have to be, but this also screws over every single character who isn't included with their own chapter. Since chapters are so constricting, some fights would just feel so unnatural than others.
This was all a
training exercise.
So we beat the shit out of these people, and it was just a test?
And those who don't get their own chapter are just destined to be weak links, unable to win a fight to save their life. I know how weird that sounded. It's just weird at this point to keep the chapter system. Just have every fight control the character more naturally. That way you can control more characters in fights, and they can be more meaningful while not as limiting. This game's ending would have been so much better if it had just focused on this new timeline. They were already setting up the drama within Outworld and how Shang, Xiao, and others were plotting up trouble to disturb the peace that the protagonist worked so hard to keep. But we want to focus on wrapping up MK Aftermath DLC. Having both endings of MK11's DLC be canon to their own timeline isn't an awful thing, all things considered. But to dedicate this game to wrapping up, that feels so weird when we just introduced this new timeline. Why focus on concluding what you did in a previous game instead of concluding the points you made in this game? This is another guess, but I'm just gonna assume that maybe MK1 just really wanted to have a grand finale ending that concludes certain things and kind of makes a weird callback that just feels unnecessary, like I said. I don't get why they even went that direction when we know this isn't really going to be where it ends. Okay, alright, early in the story of MK1, not the old one, it's established that Liu Kang, the generous king he is, gave Shang Tsung and Quan Chi pointless lives to serve no purpose in. This degrades Shang Tsung into a sorcerer who tries scamming people of Outworld in order to make a quick buck and move on. It goes on as well as you'd expect, but Kronika shows up somehow despite being killed last game to motivate Shang Tsung into causing trouble and doing her bidding. Fast forward an entire campaign and it's revealed that this wasn't Kronika, but the Shang Tsung of an alternate timeline where he beat Liu Kang for the time crown thingy of the last game. He takes over and rules an alternate timeline and wants to merge this timeline with the other one or something, I don't know. Time travel is handled so bad here. We don't know exactly what causes the time split for both Shang Tsung and Liu Kang to control their own timelines. Mind you, this is after Kronika dies, so it'd be weird if this was really the result of her restarting the timeline like MK11 screams in your face. Mortal Kombat shouldn't even really be diving into its own multiverse like this, because it does so bad at it, and is only just used as an excuse in order to further push the plot forward in the direction that was oddly predetermined due to the faults made prior. The very first actual timeline split we see is in MK9 when everyone loses and Shao Kahn wins the original Battle of Armageddon. Raiden at the ultimate low feels that there's no choice but to whip out a Deus Ex Machina and restart the timeline with a vague message to his past self. This was the initial timeline split, but thanks to the newest games not knowing what to do next or where to go, now there's an infinite number of timelines. Don't worry, if your favorite character is one who never wins, there's an alternate timeline where he or she is a Titan, even though that status makes no sense. Why even call them Titans? They're clearly not that strong if anyone can go toe-to-toe with them. I think it's hinted that regular Titans and characters who get the hourglass and become Titans are different, but like, why not just make that a little bit more clear in your story? Most of the plot ever since MK9 felt improvisational from jump, and that's how we got here to begin with. Trying to go for a multiverse on the same level scale of DC or Marvel just isn't it, at least not with this series. Alternate timelines can be cool and fun to experiment with and tell solid stories with, but when you're using them in such a shallow cop-out style of a means to an end, it's not gonna work, and you can point to damn near any other series that handles it at least a little bit better. We don't get to explore these alternate timelines, we don't know what's going on, we don't get cool stories for each one, we don't get references to alternate shows and movies, at least not in the main games. We're just told that they exist and that they work this way because it helps push the plot in the direction that we want it to go. It's a plot device. That's all time travel is in this series. Titans make little to no sense because if they're so strong, they pretty much never lose a fight, ever. Titans are pretty much whatever the writers want them to be at that moment in order to help, along with pretty much everything now. Mortal Kombat stories are just improv now. Why we felt the need for a reboot is just beyond me, since doing that only made things only way worse and more convoluted for no reason. I've had hopes for the second restart that maybe we would learn from our mistakes and just focus on making a solid story for the series, compiling of many beloved and new characters, working on each character's background, motivation, and overall arc to give at least some form of closure to each their own, and improve those who were lacking initially. Instead, not only do we screw over certain characters, degrade or half-heart them, but we also completely lose interest in what we were building because... fuck this shit, dude. This game's story isn't even bad. It's not bad at all. It's just alright at best, but it doesn't feel genuine at all with this ending. It just feels like the writers had a checklist of things to complete and this story was the outlet to complete it. Miguel was right, we gotta just let canon events happen. Raiden, you should have never restarted the timeline. So everyone gets gathered around on Aftermath Liu Kang and Aftermath Shang Tsung respectively from alternate timelines. They fight here in the Armageddon Arena Pyramid Tower thing. You select whatever character you want to win the whole thing, and that character inexplicably wins. Meet up with Fire God Liu Kang at the top of the pyramid. He loses to Shang Tsung and Quan Chi because the Deadly Alliance is this guy's only weakness, along with Weird Impulse, I guess. So Liu Kang's plot armor gets transferred over to the player character and is able to take out the 2 more Titans, making the gimmick even more laughable when you think about it. Liu Kang gets back up right after you win and sends you off and I guess says, fuck everybody else fighting at the pyramid, we're gonna leave him, except for who I want to bring back. What a guy. We get a scene where Liu Kang and the cast of this timeline are hanging out and chilling, and despite Liu Kang finally getting with MK11/wannabe 9 Katana, who also makes no sense here, she's not here for some reason.
That's the hit!
It's not a hit if somebody catches it! Call it, someone!
I got it! Wait, do you want it? No, not if you want it. Have it. But it sounded like you wanted it.
Make up your mind!
Let's share it!
No, don't share it! No!
Everyone here talks about how things are all good or whatever, and Liu Kang's gotta go ruin more lives or something. We then get one more scene where a handful of DeviantArt drawn crossover fused characters work bad and at the pyramid and with Havoc, and Havoc brags about how he wants to, oh hey look at me, I'm Havoc, and that's it, the end, see you in the next 4 years or something.